Alright, welcome back. I'm a bit slow on the old Q&A this time around. I went away for a week and then got stuck in basically the floods in Australia, as it usually happens. Last year it was actually fires I got evacuated, and this year it was floods. But that's not the point of this little thing. We're on to the Q&A, and they've answered a bunch of questions around PvE, amongst other things. And yeah, it's a bit later on, but we'll get to one of the ones which was both eye-opening and for me a little bit of a letdown. But first up, we'll look at the very first question. Can you confirm if there will still be island claiming system, or will it be lawless everywhere after the wipe? And this one seems to be, yeah, they're making updates to the area claim system, and they're going to focus on that. So the lawless claim system, and now we've got obviously the existing claim system is still being worked on. So the island claim system will be still around after the wipe. So that's the regular one, and then they've got map changes, and yeah, everything's still going to be changing. Either way, island claim systems should be available for private servers. So not a lot there, other than the fact that they're still making a lot of changes. Alright, here's one of my own. Can we get some more details of the theme and vision? The part they left out here was, I asked if they had any concept pictures or storyboard pictures of the Stormpunk theme is basically what I wanted to see. But they're saying they're not going to overhaul the game, and they want to take some of the other stuff and reinforce it with new content to show off that theme and vision. They talk about Army of the Damned themed content, Atlantis themed content, and introducing some pre-industrial content to reinforce those themes. Pre-industrial probably lend itself to that Stormpunk that they did mention, but they've completely turned away from even mentioning Stormpunk now. At least they're not throwing it up on any of the latest Q&As or patches. So Stormpunk theme may have actually dropped off, but they're looking to use what they've got to try and introduce some stuff. And so yes, I like the idea of Atlantis. That's probably the high fantasy that they once mentioned before. The dirty industrial would probably be the Stormpunk, and you know, some very specific Army of the Damned theme content, which all sounds quite nice. And obviously we can't really see any of that until they actually bother to give us something. I was hoping for some concept art, but I'm guessing that doesn't actually exist. So, next one. It's very similar to one of the questions I asked, although my question was a bit bigger. How are small companies and solo players going to work in the game? And I was asking in the question in relation to the claim system, given that the smaller players seem seriously disadvantaged, given that larger companies could easily wipe out and take all of the smaller players' stuff, albeit that it probably happens already as it is. So I wanted to know how are they going to be in the game, and that's the question they've even put there. But they say, just like in the real world, that a large company is going to need smaller people to help them get to where they want to go. They introduced this wording of wonders that the companies will want to build, and that's going to require a lot of trade, logistics, and war to get one built. Which gives an opportunity for small players to basically help those larger people, or engage in active piracies to hinder it, because of the vast quantities of resources that need to go around the map to actually build it. I don't particularly like that concept, in that the smaller companies and solo players are there just to take little chips off the side of the larger player, or they are there just to help the larger player, company, not player. If I was on there as a solo player, I would want to be able to do stuff for myself. I don't want to do it for somebody else. So to assist the larger player is not something that I would actually do. And then, you know, if all my ability is just to engage in piracy to try and take away little bits and pieces from that larger company, for them to just go, oh, we found his island, it's over there. They then, you know, take your lawless claim, plonk their own down, and then they take everything back again. You haven't really achieved anything or gained anything, because you've just been pushed back to the start. So I would have liked to have seen that smaller companies and solo players had the ability to survive in the face of the larger players, so that they could actually have some fun playing the game, not helping out that bigger player. Okay, next one. When can we expect balance changes? And the answer here is that the balance changes are happening consistently, because they're still adding lots of new stuff to the game, and they have to understand and tweak and tighten and work things out. And we can very much see this one actually playing out, because every time they add something into the game, we're seeing things kind of break, or we're seeing things that aren't quite right, and they're constantly just updating, tweaking, optimizing, and getting it going. And, you know, it is how they've stated that they want to actually do it. They've kind of gone back to the "we are early access" terminology, and so they're just throwing all this new stuff at us as they make it. Let us see it. And they even said, I think in one of the previous ones, that as we use it, if nobody ends up using it, they will monitor it. And if nobody is using it, they'll actually either change it or remove it from the game. So this is probably something that's going to be ever present for quite some time to come. Okay, time for one of the eye-opening questions. Can we get some form of a roadmap, even if it has a disclaimer that the plans could change? And their answer here, which is a great one, lots of info in here, is that they're focused on a large release. That large release containing more ships, the modular system, and the fact that they're working on multiple maps connecting the greater world. So instead of one big map, you have other maps connected together, probably through these portal systems. It sounds crazy. It'd be interesting to see how that one actually gets pulled together. But I like the idea of it, where essentially you have different Atlas worlds that are then joined together via portals, and you could live on a whole separate system. Who knows how that one's going to actually play out. Sounds crazy. The next part, again, they bring us back to this foundation for the wonders, that the players will basically be creating these things to give a general buff to your company once you've built them. And it sounds like it might be, well, they did say it's going to take quite a lot to build the wonders, and so you're going to have to get quite a lot of resources. And the content that they're working on generally to support them will hopefully give companies a long-term goal and a reason to compete over very specific land. And they're expecting that to take something like 6 months to a year to complete. I like the sound of pretty much all of this answer, because it shows that there's some very significant stuff in the works in terms of a lot of the concepts that they're actually thinking about, albeit that it's going to be... I knew it was going to take quite a long time for getting anything. I was actually expecting more the year in length. If we can get it in 6 months, great. So yeah, lots and lots of good stuff in there. Obviously we're not going to be able to see a lot of it. We may end up seeing obviously the ships and the modular system sooner than the maps and the wonders and all of that sort of stuff. But yeah, very big answer, quite eye-opening, and hopefully that will lead to some very, very interesting stuff to keep people in the game. However, it's the next question, I guess, that's not the best for myself. So, we all know that the focus is on PvP, but PvE players are curious with the long-term thoughts and ideas, as apparently they're feeling a bit marginalised and pushed aside. I can attest to that a little bit, and I certainly know that some people around me certainly have that as well. And the key pointer here, which is the one that I wasn't so happy to hear, is that they are focused on making Atlas one of the best and most unique PvP games out there, which seems to... In one of the previous Q&As, I believe it was a Q&A, they said that their primary focus was PvP, but they sort of said that it was their primary focus right now, where they'd start working on the PvE stuff later. And this seems to be more the, you know, we want to make it a PvP game, and there will be, you know, a PvE on the side. But yes, definitely that it is a PvP game, and us PvE players who are along for the ride, we're pretty much just going to be hoping for some good stuff, but we may not actually be the primary focus of the game anymore. But it doesn't specifically state that, that's just me reading into the answer. What's actually good about this answer is that they actually talk about giving the unofficial servers the tools, better tools to be able to configure the worlds. So overhauling the configuration system under the bonnet. So I assume this is like the ini files where we can set some of the values. And they're saying that at the moment a lot of it's hard-coded under certain conditions, and they want to be able to open that up by the looks of it. I like that. I like the idea of having more options at my fingertips, that I can actually create the world that I want to play with. Okay, on to the rest of it. Are the new claim tales going to be modified for PvE, and will the mechanic change at all? They'd like to hear from PvE players about this. There was a massive disruption when it first got put in. A lot of people lost their stuff. because basically people can come in and lay those first few claim towers and take everybody else's stuff. But the idea is that once the wipe comes in on the next patch, you will be able to lay claim to an area, and that way you will not actually have to prevent other people building in your area because you actually have your claim spot. And they need to work out a decay time for the towers, so that any PvE players who have left, you can obviously take that claim, or once it's destroyed you can lay your own claim over the destroyed spot. For me, the only other thing that I would like to see modified for the PvE, and potentially even the PvP, is I remember seeing when it first came in, I jumped on the PvE server to see what it was like, other than the fact that it's laggy for me in Australia. Some islands were being taken up by an entire company where they just spam claim towers across the entire island, and I think that's probably something that shouldn't be allowed. Yeah, I don't actually know what the real answer there is. Like, how many companies would you think should be able to actually be on an island? An unlimited amount? You know, should one company be able to own half the island? Yeah, and that comes down to, you know, like the claim points and island points and all that sort of stuff. Whether players should actually, or companies rather, should be limited to the number of towers that they can place on an island, or the world generally. I suspect that's really where I would like them to do a bit of tweaking and work out an answer to that one. Alright, weight sales buff or change when? I tend to recall this was actually something they said earlier. They were actually doing something with the sales system, specifically around blueprints, I guess. And so yes, they're basically saying sales are all getting updated. The harder question is when. And then an interesting point in here is actually taking time out on some of the smaller things. So it sounds like there is a bit of a push to get some of the bigger changes out. Maybe they're seeing a deadline looming and they really need to push hard. But they also mentioned they want to update the mod kit. Obviously earlier they mentioned the configurations overhaul, which is nice. It seems to be a bit of a priority. And lots of bugs. Well, we know they exist. Always good for bug fixes. And growing the team. I got wind of that a bit earlier, so yes, growing the team is always good. If you've got the money, you've got the time, got the know-how, growing a team is always fun to hear, because it means stuff happens, I guess, quicker. It'll be interesting to see which part of the team that member, I guess, gets added to, and good luck to them. Next one, well, this one was a little bit of an interesting one too. What tweaks do the team have to the new claim system we are testing on Lawless Islands? And they're in the process of obviously, you know, seeing how the new islands affect things. They talk about the meta there and making some tweaks, or before they make some tweaks. And in terms of the long-term stuff, they want to add a unique building that can be captured to get some kind of a benefit. And once you capture that, gives offensive or defensive benefit. It might take you multiple days to get it, and you may even need to build stuff there before the benefit kicks in. So that's kind of basically, yeah, you've got islands, and although there isn't a claim point specifically there already, you have to go in there and put your own claim down to actually then hold that point for a certain amount of time to get some kind of benefit. It actually reminds me a little bit of Warhammer. Oh, that's right, it was Warhammer Dawn of War. And everything, basically had static control points that you would go and get, and that would then give you resources. This may give, as it says, more of an offensive or defensive benefit, as opposed to resources, because we already have a survival game where we collect resources, and market system where you collect resources. So to actually have some kind of other strategic benefit would make sense. I definitely like this idea. This is seems one of those things that will end up being put on PvP, and it'll have no real thing on a PvE sense, unless you have some kind of a recycling mechanism that the previous player gets kicked out and can't just take it straight away, because otherwise you have one person that gains the benefit and nobody ever gets it. But I could definitely see from a PvP point of view, that would be a one way where they talk about having strategic islands where they want people to fight over. That would certainly do it. When will you add side quests? Maybe ones that earn gold, loot, XP, other than the skill tree achievements and the PvE bosses. And they mentioned then basically that MMORPG elements are not something that they want to spend their time on, as that's not the game that they really want to make, and they want a sandbox survival game, and the development effort should go into making the tools for the players to use, and then the players basically decide how the game evolves for them. I'm split a little bit on that, because I actually think that they could put in, if you've got a strategic island that gives you an offensive or defensive benefit, you can have a creature in the game that gives you a temporary offensive or defensive benefit too, which gives another thing to be fought over. And it's been seen in other games, and you can certainly put that in there. I guess in other games they might have called them world bosses and things like that. But yeah, rather than island to capture, it's a creature that only spawns for a specific amount of time, and if you're the one that actually manages to get there and kill it, then you're the one that gets the benefit. And it doesn't have to be about gold, loot, or XP, it can be other things. And then obviously in a PvP sense, you have to be able to get there before somebody else and prevent them from griefing you while you fight it. And from a PvE sense, it can be a very, very difficult thing for you to overcome. But they may put something in. They're already talking about the portals going to things where you actually have to achieve something. It may just not be a boss, it may be something else. And we'll have to see what they come up with, but I certainly think they could integrate that concept with their existing idea. But it may be a much, much later consideration for them, because they've obviously got to get the base game right. They're already talking 6 to 12 months to fix the game to where they want it, and then those extra features may actually come in, which probably feeds straight into the next question, which is, are you going to make more tames and bosses? Obviously the bosses is a no-no, but then you have the tames, which they actually have someone working on tames, and yeah, they're looking at basically it looks like they're looking at the existing tameable creatures, and then I assume that they will then move on to other things. And they specifically say they don't plan to add any new bosses. Alright. But crocodiles are the current one on the next list of creatures to be tamed. I just imagine baby crocs at this point. The crocodiles themselves are fine as they are, but I want to tame a crocodile just so I can see what the baby crocodiles look like and see how derpy they look. I'm sure it's going to look a little bit funny, but we'll see how that goes. They don't like the current boss fights because they're easily exploited. And there's the reason why they're easily exploited is because you have to exploit them to be able to defeat them. There's no nice way, no decent way that I've found to actually fight them. Obviously things like the dragon, you have to kite it with a boat so that you can actually shoot it down and hope you don't get hit along the way. And the hydra, you just straight up have to hide in a building up high and use the terrain or the buildings to prevent yourself from dying from the flames and other ranged attacks. And so whether you consider that exploiting or not, because there's no mechanic way of actually defeating them, like you can't set up a fort and actually fight them, because the creatures just easily overcome that problem. But they've already said in previous points they don't want to focus on that. They want to create a world which has a bunch of stuff for people to do, and then it's up to the people to decide how to do it. And so the bosses are obviously going to take second seat to that until all of that other stuff is dealt with. And then, when they look to improve the game, add patches or add DLC in the future, maybe then we'll see some of that sort of stuff. But for now, we just have to deal with it. When will we see further information about the new ship system and further adjustments? And they say, well, they're continuously making new changes, and definitely knew all that, the customizations, but what they're saying here is the first feature they're probably going to release soon is the ability to change railing types. And that sounds really, really nice to me, because it's a nice simple one to start off with. And the types of railings are really cool. There's a couple in there that are already existing, so your cargo racks, your diving attachments, and your dinghy hanger are going to be railings. It's a very nice way of actually fitting them into the modular system. But then they also talk about cannon railings. And so in the past, where you've kind of been set with how you put your cannons with your cannon ports, and to put cannons on the deck, you just have to freeform the cannons on the deck, and occasionally you'd build some ceilings and walls and whatever else and some ramps, and you could put extra rows of cannons. But if we can replace the railings on the deck for cannon pieces on ships that don't normally have cannons there, you can increase the firepower of a ship by doing so, and that takes that customization of adding they probably need to change that to just not be cannon railings, but to also potentially be ballista railings and other things like that, so that it's not just cannons that are going there, because balusters are actually quite useful on ships as well, and potentially other things, but they may be doing that from a balance point of view and trying to prevent certain things actually going in. But I like it, it's good. And then they also mentioned that painting is the thing, so they're obviously working on the new ships, which are a little bit buggy with their painting. Put that in. The bugginess of the painting I'm perfectly fine with, because it's such a simple thing, but that wouldn't be your initial focus. You get it working, get it in, optimize it a little bit, and then go, okay, well here's your cosmetic stuff, which seems to be what this one is. Will the current ship system still be available next season, or are you just going to be the new modular ships? Well, I already know that that's not actually the case, and as they say, there's no plan to remove the original ship system yet. I'm missing that little yet. Basically, they need the new system to be fully implemented. It's going to all be side by side. We're going to see all that going on. And there's going to be all manner of addressing of balancing and all that kind of stuff. And I can see them revamping the old ship system with the new modular system in the future, especially with some of the stuff that they've actually got going on there. I'm liking where they've got that customization features going on. But yeah, the current ship system, I can't imagine that it goes away, and even when we're talking that 6 to 12 months for that other stuff that they're working on, the current ship system is surely going to be in there for that long, because they won't know the full ramifications of all the stuff that they're doing until all of that stuff's in, and then even some more time on beyond that, because they'll still be working out some of the balancing stuff before it even gets to like the revision 0 the game is actually released from early access. So yeah, I reckon the current system will be in there for a long time. Will there be a new map implemented? Some changes to the map layout are going to be coming with the next wipe to support trade winds. Now that's an interesting one there, right? So it's a map layout change, probably within the next week, because they do patches every couple of weeks. Now that we've had the Q&A, we should have next week, we'll have a patch which will include the wipe and a change to the map layout. Think about that for a bit. That's going to be an interesting one, quite significant. At least it comes with a wipe, so map layout change, everyone's wiped, everyone jumps in, something new to work with. I don't think we'll actually have the trade winds in, I wouldn't expect it, but it's just obviously has some modifications that will support it. And then they talk about later in the year they'll have more changes, a larger overhaul, which will support the portals. It also sounds really nice too, but that's a much later problem. I'm more interested in a layout change, as well as trade winds, which are probably closer than I thought they were. Is there a plan to add a farmhouse-like structure that could also feed tames, or the ability for tames to wander around and feed themselves? And the answer here is it's left field. I wouldn't have expected the answer. They want to have a stable where you actually store your tames, and I would assume then that the stable would then have food. And if that stable is like a farmhouse-like structure or a warehouse-like structure, you can draw from the farmhouses or the warehouse and actually pull food into it. And they want a similar type of module on the ship where you can actually transport your tames. The question there is this new structure also going to support transporting of your water tames? So on your ship you'll have a storage maybe in your bilge or whatever else. That's where the horrible place to keep your dolphin. But essentially it's a bigger area of your bilge tank is where you end up storing your dolphins so you can transport them from one map to another, because you want to take your dolphins over to a trench, but you might not actually live near a trench, and you need to take your army of dolphins and seahorses over to the trench so that you can actually work with them. And then obviously we've got crocs coming up too, and you want to be able to have that water transport, let alone the other types of transport. Very interesting. I'll be interested in this. Interested to see how that one actually gets installed into the ships. Alright, last question. When will we get cosmetic hat microtransactions or a vendor? I added on the vendor part, but someone from my Discord was interested in knowing if we were going to get hat microtransactions. And the answer is that there are going to be no microtransactions for anything, cosmetic or otherwise. All their art effort is going into making new ships, but apparently they do have one new hat coming soon. They didn't even mention whether or not they'd add those hat skins into a vendor or not. It would have been nice to know if they're interested in that, because they already do have the ship skin stuff that you can actually purchase from a vendor. So if you have a vendor for stock standard hats, and then your specialized ones, you actually have to actually get the achievement or kill a certain thing to actually get it. But yeah, that's the answer to that one. Well, that brings us to the end of the Q&A once again. This actually dragged out for quite a lot longer than I actually expected to be able to answer all these questions and go over my thoughts on them. And there is a hell of a lot of information once again. And on the face of it, you kind of go, oh, there's not that much. But when you actually read into it, there is actually quite a fair bit. Whether you like the additions or not, it's really hard to actually say whether what they're doing is right or wrong when you're actually talking about a development and a plan that has a 6 to 12 month time span and a deadline. Because we're going to have to wait 6 months at the minimum with all this extra stuff that's coming in, new maps, trade wins, claims, all the rest of that. And then they have this big release that they're talking about, which has got a 6 month timeline. We have to wait for that before we really understand how it's all going to come together. And even then, that release doesn't include balancing and fixing and optimizations. So yeah, I was expecting it, and I think I said it earlier. So I was actually more expecting a 12-month range, which is why that, you know, I don't have a problem with where a lot of this stuff's going. I can have my disappointment, or I can have my highs and lows and be happy or not. But the real test of all the time will actually come 6 to 12 months from now, when they actually release that big lot of information that just gets loaded into everybody, and we sort of go, oh wow, so maybe that's how it was all meant to fit together. And then we can basically have that judgment call. In the meantime, you know, it's early access, they're going to change, they're going to throw stuff at you. It's going to feel like that we're the people testing the system. We're not the only people testing the system, there's stuff going behind closed doors as well. But yeah, the people are also being used for, you know, is a feature actually going to be good from the point of view that people will use it? You know, and a tester isn't actually going to tell you whether you're the person to use it or not. They can just, a tester is someone that's actually going to tell you, is it broken or not? And you know, for the most part, we all know that the stuff that's being released is broken in some way. But for the people that are actually playing around with all the stuff and seeing how it all works and stuff like that, it's more a case of, would you use it? And then 6-12 months time, when all the rest of the stuff actually starts to land, you know, is the stuff that's actually being released now actually going to fit in with the stuff that's actually released 12 months from now? Which is just a crazy thought to actually think, but that's essentially where I'm reading into this entire thing. I'm going to definitely be interested to see how it all pans out. I'm certainly looking forward to the wipe and a match change, and then from there, a bit screaming behind me with someone playing Phasmophobia, but yeah, looking forward to the wipe. Can I jump in on the... I actually don't know if I'm going to jump in on PvP or whether I'll jump in on PvE. I've never been one for joining big companies or anything like that, but there's obviously the chance to jump onto PvP with a wipe and actually see if I can join up with some other people and have a bit of a fun time, or I can jump onto the PvE and actually get an early claim on one of the islands and actually have my own little slice of life that I can actually play around with. And that will obviously happen within the next week, which is actually exciting to think about. Alright, make sure that if you enjoyed all of this and you managed to actually make it through to the end of this what will be almost half-hour chat, let me know down in the comments what you think. Hit the like or dislike depending on what you thought of it all, or at least my part of it. Don't put a dislike if you don't like what Atlas is doing. You actually need to go and jump on the Discord and let them know there. It's already something that they need to know, or at least if nobody uses this stuff, just remember, if you don't play with it, they're going to remove it. So it's a thing. Yeah, thanks for listening in, and I hope to catch you when I actually jump in and actually have a go after the wipe. Catch you later.